Nothing says trust like a wife who spends more time in the mirror than with you. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Eddie Lawton, 39 years old, and I've been watching my marriage dissolve in real time like sugar in acid rain. The woman I married 5 years ago has transformed into someone I barely recognize, someone who treats our home like a hotel and me like the bellhop. Mira used to be different. Back when we met at that coffee shop in downtown Boston, she was genuine, laughing at my terrible IT jokes and actually listening when I talked about upgrading our neighborhood's fiber optic infrastructure. Now she rolls her eyes when I mention anything more technical than changing a light bulb. "Eddie, you're so practical," she said last Tuesday, the word dripping with disdain like she'd tasted something rotten. She was getting ready for another one of her mysterious business dinners with her boss, Damian Roarke, the CEO of Elite Travel Solutions, a luxury travel agency that caters to Boston's wealthiest residents. Mira works as their operations manager, a position she landed 6 months ago and has been milking for all it's worth. I watched her apply lipstick in our bedroom mirror, red, bold, the kind she used to save for our anniversary dinners. "Where exactly are you going in such a stunning dress?" I asked, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "The Ocean View restaurant. You know, the one with the panoramic windows overlooking the harbor." She didn't even look at me while she spoke. "Damian wants to discuss the Henderson account. Big money, Eddie. Something you wouldn't understand." "Right. Because apparently working in IT for a mid-sized insurance company makes me incapable of understanding big money. Never mind that I'm the one who keeps our household budget balanced while she blows through credit cards like confetti." The dress she mentioned was new, a sleek black number that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Everything about Mira had become expensive lately. New clothes, new perfume, new attitude. She'd started working out at an upscale gym with her friends Jess and Tanya, two women who treated marriage like a competitive sport, where the goal was to see who could extract the most benefits from their husbands while giving the least in return. "Don't wait up," Mira called over her shoulder as she grabbed her purse. Also new, also expensive. "These business discussions can run late." I stood in our bedroom, surrounded by the evidence of her transformation. Designer shoes scattered across the floor, makeup scattered across the dresser, receipts for restaurants I couldn't afford tucked into her jewelry box. When had I become a backup dancer in my own marriage? My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend Rick, who bartends at Murphy's Pub downtown. "Come by tonight. First beer's on me. You look like you need it." Rick has this uncanny ability to sense when I'm drowning in domestic misery. Maybe it's his professional training. Bartenders are like therapists with better alcohol access and worse health insurance. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, leaving behind the lingering scent of Mira's new perfume and the echo of her high heels clicking against our hardwood floors. Murphy's Pub is everything our house isn't. Comfortable, honest, unpretentious. Rick was wiping down glasses when I walked in, his weathered face breaking into a knowing grin. "Let me guess," he said, sliding a beer across the bar. "The missus is out on another business dinner with Mr. Wonderful?" "How'd you know?" "Because you have that look, like someone who just watched his dog get stolen by someone driving a Ferrari." Rick leaned against the bar. "Tell me about this boss of hers." I took a long drink before answering. Damian Roarke, mid-40s, married, thinks he's God's gift to the travel industry, drives a Tesla, wears suits that cost more than I make in a month, and apparently requires a lot of after-hours consultation with my wife. Sounds like a real prince. The worst part is how obvious it is. She comes home smelling like expensive wine and cologne that definitely isn't mine. She's got new clothes, new jewelry, new everything. And when I ask about it, she acts like I'm paranoid for noticing. Rick nodded sympathetically. "What does your gut tell you?" My gut tells me I'm being played for a fool, but my brain keeps making excuses. Maybe she really is just trying to advance her career. Maybe I'm imagining things because I'm insecure about the money difference between her job and mine. Eddie, I've been tending bar for 15 years. I've seen every type of cheater, liar, and manipulator this city has to offer. Trust your gut. It's usually right. I finished my beer and ordered another. The alcohol helped dull the sharp edges of my suspicion, but it couldn't erase the growing certainty that my marriage was circling the drain. When I finally headed home around 11, Mira still wasn't back from her business dinner. I found myself going through her things, not proud of it, but desperation makes you do stupid things. In her jewelry box, tucked behind a pair of earrings I'd never seen before, I found a receipt from the Ocean View restaurant, 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, 1 bottle of champagne. At the bottom, in handwriting that definitely wasn't Mira's, someone had written, "For the best night ever, D." My hands were shaking as I read it. All those late nights, all those new clothes, all those dismissive comments about my practical nature. It was all adding up to a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Mira came home at 12:30 a.m., her lipstick gone and her hair slightly mussed. She found me sitting at the kitchen table with the receipt in front of me. "What's that?" she asked, but her voice had lost its usual confident edge. "You tell me. I found it in your jewelry box." She picked up the receipt, her face cycling through surprise, anger, and finally settling on indignation. "You went through my things? Eddie, that's a complete violation of privacy. Answer the question, Mira. Who's D and why is he writing love notes on restaurant receipts? It's not a love note, it's just... Damian was happy about closing the Henderson deal. He was being celebratory. Celebratory enough to buy champagne and write romantic messages? It wasn't romantic. You're being paranoid again. But I could see the lie in her eyes, the way she wouldn't quite meet my gaze. The woman I'd married would have been horrified by the suggestion that she was having an affair. This woman was just annoyed that she'd been caught. "I'm taking your parents to the Ocean View tomorrow night," I said quietly. "For dinner. Maybe they'd like to see where you conduct all this important business." The color drained from her face. "Eddie, don't be ridiculous. You can't just..." "Can't what? Take my in-laws to a nice restaurant? I'm sure they'd love to hear about your promotion prospects." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes. Finally, she turned and walked toward the bedroom. "Do whatever you want, Eddie. You always do anyway." As I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was being joined by something else, a cold, calculating anger that I'd never felt before. If Mira wanted to play games, I was about to become a much better player than she'd bargained for. I picked up my phone and called her parents. The Ocean View restaurant sits on the 32nd floor of the Harborview Tower, offering what the website calls an unparalleled dining experience with breathtaking views of Boston Harbor. What it really offers is overpriced food and the kind of pretentious atmosphere that makes you feel underdressed even when you're wearing your best suit. I was wearing my best suit, a navy blue number I'd bought for our wedding and had worn maybe 6 times since. Sitting across from me were Mira's parents, Harold and Patricia Harrow, 2 people who had never quite forgiven their daughter for marrying beneath her station. "This is quite nice, Eddie," Patricia said, though her tone suggested she was surprised I could afford such a place. "What's the occasion?" "I thought you should see where Mira conducts her business meetings. She speaks so highly of this place." Harold adjusted his glasses and studied the menu. $48 for sea bass? In my day, you could buy a whole boat for that price. I'd positioned us strategically, a corner table with a clear view of the restaurant's main dining area. From here, I could see the entrance, the bar, and most importantly, the intimate table for 2 by the floor-to-ceiling windows where Mira would be conducting her business meeting with Damian Roarke. There she is, I said quietly as Mira walked in at exactly 7:30. She looked stunning, I had to admit. The black dress I'd seen her in the night before had been replaced by something even more elegant, a deep red number that hugged her curves and probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless, and she moved with the confidence of a woman who knew she looked incredible. Behind her walked Damian Roarke, and I finally got my first good look at my wife's boss. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He had the kind of practiced charm that comes from years of manipulating people for profit, and the way he placed his hand on the small of Mira's back as they walked to their table made my stomach clench with rage. "Oh my," Patricia whispered. "Mira looks absolutely radiant." "Doesn't she?" I agreed, keeping my voice level. "And that must be her boss, Damian Roarke, the one she's been working so closely with on the Henderson account." Harold squinted across the restaurant. "Bit old for her, isn't he?" "He's a very successful businessman," I said. "Married, of course. 3 kids. I'm sure his wife appreciates how dedicated he is to mentoring his employees." We ordered our meals, and I kept up a steady stream of conversation with the Harrows, all while watching the dinner theater playing out across the restaurant. Mira and Damian had been seated at the best table in the house, with a perfect view of the harbor lights twinkling in the darkness. The waiter brought them champagne, the same champagne, I noticed, that was listed on the receipt I'd found. "They seem to be having quite an animated discussion," Patricia observed. "Very friendly." Friendly was one way to put it. From where I sat, I could see Mira laughing at everything Damian said, leaning forward to touch his arm, playing with her hair in that way she used to do when we were dating. The body language was unmistakable. This wasn't a business dinner. It was foreplay with appetizers. "Mira's always been very dedicated to her career," I said. "Sometimes I think she cares more about her job than anything else in her life." Harold grunted his approval. "Good work ethic. We raised her right." "You certainly did." Our entrees arrived just as things were heating up at Mira's table. Damian had reached across and was stroking her hand, while she gazed into his eyes with an expression I remembered from our honeymoon. The sight of it made me want to throw something, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was just the opening act. "Eddie," Patricia said suddenly, "isn't that Mira kissing that man?" I looked over with feigned surprise. Sure enough, Mira and Damian were locked in what could generously be called a passionate embrace. Her hand was on the back of his neck, his was tangled in her hair, and they were going at it like teenagers at a drive-in movie. "Well," I said mildly, "that's certainly one way to close a business deal." Harold's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. "What in the hell is going on over there?" "I believe our daughter is having an affair," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It does look that way, doesn't it?" I stood up slowly, smoothing down my tie. Maybe I should go say hello. After all, it would be rude not to acknowledge my wife when I see her in public. I walked across the restaurant with deliberate slowness, giving myself time to savor the moment. Other diners were starting to notice the passionate display at the window table, and I could hear the subtle buzz of conversation that indicated gossip in progress. By the time I reached their table, Mira and Damian had separated, but her lipstick was smudged and his hair was disheveled. "Excuse me," I said pleasantly. "I hate to interrupt such an important business meeting, but I wanted to say hello to my wife." Mira's face went through several color changes before settling on ash gray. "Eddie, what are you doing here?" "Having dinner with your parents. You remember your parents, don't you? Harold and Patricia. They're sitting right over there, watching this fascinating display of professional networking." Damian started to stand up, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Look here, you—" "Sit down," I said quietly. and something in my voice made him comply. "We're going to handle this like civilized adults. Mira, darling, would you mind introducing me to your colleague? I've heard so much about him." "Eddie, please, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like my wife is having dinner with her boss, drinking champagne, and sticking her tongue down his throat. But maybe that's just how business is conducted in the travel industry these days." By now, we had the attention of half the restaurant. I could see people holding up their phones, undoubtedly recording this little drama for social media posterity. The thought of Mira's humiliation going viral filled me with a warm glow of satisfaction. Damian tried again to assert control. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're causing a disturbance." "I'm causing a disturbance. Mr. Roarke, I believe you're the one who's been disturbing my marriage for the past several months. Tell me, does your wife know about your hands-on management style?" "How dare you?" "How dare I what? Point out that you're a married man having an affair with his employee? That you're using company resources to wine and dine my wife? That you're both so arrogant you thought you could conduct your little romance in public without consequences?" Mira was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Eddie, please, we can talk about this at home." "Oh, we're way past talking, sweetheart. You see, when I found that romantic little note on your restaurant receipt, I realized I needed to see this legendary business relationship for myself. And what do you know? It's exactly what I thought it was." Damian stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough. I'm calling security." "Excellent idea. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear about your expense account activities. I wonder if your company's board of directors knows you're using corporate funds to seduce your employees?" The color drained from Damian's face. In that moment, I realized I'd hit on something bigger than just an affair. There was real fear in his eyes, the kind that comes from having actual secrets to hide. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Don't I? Mira's been very chatty about her work lately. All those late-night strategy sessions, all those expensive client dinners, all those business trips that seem to require such personal attention. I'm starting to think there's more to elite travel solutions than meets the eye." Before either of them could respond, I heard Patricia's voice behind me. "Mira Elizabeth Harrow, what is the meaning of this?" My mother-in-law had approached our table with the righteous fury of a woman whose daughter had just publicly disgraced the family name. Harold was right behind her, looking like he wanted to challenge someone to a duel. "Mom, Dad, I can explain." "Explain what?" Harold's voice boomed across the restaurant. "Explain why you're here kissing another man while your husband sits 20 feet away? Explain why you're dressed like a... "Harold!" Patricia warned, but her own voice was shaking with anger. The scene was perfect, better than I could have scripted. Mira was crying, Damian was sweating, her parents were furious, and half of Boston's social media was capturing every moment for posterity. I felt a surge of satisfaction that was almost intoxicating. "Well," I said cheerfully, "this has been illuminating. Mira, I'll see you at home. We have a lot to discuss. Mr. Roarke, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again very soon." I turned and walked back to my table, leaving chaos in my wake. Behind me, I could hear Mira trying to explain herself to her parents, while Damian attempted to salvage what was left of his dignity. The restaurant staff was hovering nervously, clearly wanting to intervene but unsure how to handle a situation that had spiraled so far out of control. As I paid our check, I noticed several people approaching Mira's table. One of them was a woman I didn't recognize, elegantly dressed, furious, and heading straight for Damian with the purposeful stride of someone who had just seen her husband's infidelity broadcast on social media. Mrs. Roarke, I presumed. The confrontation that followed was even better than I'd hoped. Damian's wife slapped him so hard the sound echoed across the restaurant, then turned her fury on Mira with a string of accusations that would have made a sailor blush. Within minutes, security was escorting all parties out of the restaurant, But not before Damian's wife had fired Mira on the spot. Apparently, she held significant influence in her husband's company. I walked out of the Ocean View restaurant feeling better than I had in months. The first phase of my revenge was complete, and it had exceeded all expectations. Mira's affair was now public knowledge. Her job was gone, her parents were disgusted, and Damian's marriage was in ruins. But as I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You'll regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with." I looked back at the restaurant and saw Damian Roarke standing by the valet station, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face twisted with rage. He was staring directly at me, and even from a distance, I could see the promise of retaliation in his eyes. Bring it on, I thought. I was just getting started. The video went viral by morning. Wife caught cheating at fancy restaurant had been viewed over 50,000 times before I finished my first cup of coffee. The comment section was a mixture of sympathy for me and brutal mockery of Mira and Damian. Someone had even created memes using screenshots of Mira's tear-streaked face. I should have felt guilty about the public humiliation, but mostly I felt vindicated. For months, I'd been gaslighted into thinking I was paranoid and insecure. Now the whole world could see what I'd been dealing with. My phone had been ringing constantly since 6 a.m. Reporters wanting statements, friends offering support, and unfortunately my boss wanting explanations. Apparently, having your personal drama go viral reflects poorly on the company's professional image. I was being placed on administrative leave pending a review of whether my personal conduct violated the employee handbook. They say humiliation builds character, I muttered to myself as I read the email. So why do I feel like a cartoon villain's origin story? Mira hadn't come home the night before. I'd found a note on the kitchen counter saying she was staying with Jess and would be back for her things later. Good. I needed time to think, and her absence made it easier to focus on what I'd discovered during the restaurant confrontation. Damian's reaction when I mentioned expense accounts and corporate funds had been telling. There was something bigger going on at Elite Travel Solutions, something that made a simple affair look like small potatoes. If I was going to be destroyed professionally for exposing their relationship, I might as well make it count. I called Rick around noon. He answered on the first ring. "Eddie, Jesus Christ, man, you're all over the internet. That was some performance last night. Just getting started, I need a favor." "Name it." "You know people in the restaurant industry, right? Waiters, bartenders, managers?" "Sure, it's a small community. Why?" "I need information about Damian Roarke's dining habits, specifically who he's been entertaining and how he's been paying for it." Rick was quiet for a moment. "You think there's more to this than just an affair?" "I know there is. The way he reacted when I mentioned corporate funds. He's scared of something bigger than his wife finding out about his extracurricular activities. Give me a few hours. I'll make some calls." While Rick worked his contacts, I decided to do some digital detective work of my own. Mira had left her laptop at home, and I still knew her passwords. She'd never been particularly security conscious. I felt a twinge of guilt about invading her privacy, but that ship had sailed when I found her tongue in her boss's mouth. Her email was a goldmine. Months of correspondence with Damian about client entertainment, business development, and special projects that seemed to involve an unusual amount of expensive dinners and weekend trips. But it was the financial records that really caught my attention. Elite Travel Solutions had been billing clients for services that seemed questionable at best. Luxury accommodations for site inspections that lasted weeks, transportation costs that exceeded the actual price of first-class flights, and consulting fees for projects that had no documentation. Mira's role appeared to be creating the paperwork that made these inflated charges look legitimate. My phone rang. Rick. "You were right," he said without preamble. "Damian Roarke has been throwing money around like confetti for the past year. Always cash payments, always with different women, always at the most expensive places in the city. But here's the interesting part. According to my friend who manages the Ocean View, he's been using a corporate credit card for everything. Even the personal stuff? Especially the personal stuff. Dinners with women who definitely aren't his wife, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases, even a weekend trip to Napa Valley with someone who matches your wife's description. I felt my anger crystallize into something harder and more focused. They weren't just having an affair, they were stealing money to fund it. And somehow, Mira's paperwork was making it all look legal. There's more, Rick continued. My friend says Roarke's been bragging about having a foolproof system for hiding personal expenses. Claims he's got someone on the inside who can make any transaction look like a legitimate business expense. Someone like an operations manager who handles client billing? Exactly. Eddie, if this is what I think it is, you're not just dealing with adultery. You're looking at embezzlement, fraud, maybe tax evasion. This could put them both in prison. After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and considered my options. I could take what I'd learned to the police, but corporate fraud investigations take years, and the evidence might not be enough for criminal charges. I could report them to their company's board of directors, but Damian might have enough influence to weather that storm. Or I could handle this myself. The idea formed slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. If Damian and Mira wanted to play dirty, I'd show them what dirty really looked like, but I'd do it smart, and I'd do it in a way that destroyed them completely. First, I needed more evidence, and to get that evidence, I'd need to break into Mira's office. Elite Travel Solutions occupied the 15th floor of a downtown office building, with the kind of security that looked impressive, but was actually designed more for show than effectiveness. I'd spent enough time in corporate IT to know that most office buildings had laughable cybersecurity and physical security that relied more on the assumption that no one would be bold enough to break in than on actual deterrence. I waited until midnight, then drove downtown with a laptop bag full of equipment I'd borrowed from my own office. USB drives, network cables, a portable hard drive, and a few other tools that would help me copy everything on Mira's computer and access the company's financial records. The building's parking garage was empty, except for a few cars belonging to the overnight cleaning crew. I took the elevator to the 15th floor, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was either going to be the smartest thing I'd ever done or the stupidest, but either way, it beat sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. Elite Travel Solutions' office was dark except for the emergency lighting. I made my way to Mira's cubicle, which was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected. Expensive decorations, fresh flowers, and a motivational poster about reaching for excellence that made me want to vomit. Her computer was password protected, but I'd been married to her for 5 years. She used the same 3 passwords for everything: our wedding date, her birthday, and the name of her childhood dog. The third one worked. Mission impossible. Eat your heart out, I muttered as I plugged in my portable drive and started copying files. While the data transfer ran, I searched through her desk. The bottom drawer was locked, but the lock was flimsy enough that I could force it open with a letter opener. Inside, I found a second phone, one I'd never seen before. The phone was a treasure trove. Months of text messages between Mira and Damian that made their relationship crystal clear, along with photos that left nothing to the imagination. But more importantly, there were conversations about money. Lots of money. The Peterson account cleared. That's another $50K we can move, read one message from Damian. Mira's response: already processed, showing as consulting fees for site evaluation. No one will question it. You're amazing. Dinner at the Ritz tomorrow to celebrate? Only if you're buying jewelry again. I have expensive tastes. Anything for my partner in crime. I photographed every message, every photo, every piece of evidence I could find. By the time I finished, I had enough material to destroy both of their lives and probably send them to federal prison. I was packing up my equipment when I heard footsteps in the hallway. My blood froze as I realized someone else was in the building. The footsteps were getting closer, accompanied by the jingling of keys and the low murmur of a radio. Security guard. I quickly shut down Mira's computer and grabbed my bag, looking around frantically for an escape route. The office was on the 15th floor, so jumping out a window wasn't an option. The elevator would be too risky. If the guard was doing a floor-by-floor check, I'd run right into him. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. I heard the jingle of keys and saw a flashlight beam sweep across the glass partition. I ducked behind a filing cabinet and held my breath. The security guard entered the office, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as he made his rounds. He was older, heavy-set, moving with the casual pace of someone who'd done this routine 1,000 times and never found anything more threatening than a mouse. I waited until he moved to the far end of the office, then crept toward the emergency stairwell. The door was heavy and I was terrified it would creak, but it opened silently. I slipped into the stairwell and started down, taking the steps 2 at a time. 15 flights of stairs later, I emerged into the parking garage, my heart pounding and my shirt soaked with sweat. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I had enough evidence to destroy Damian and Mira, and they had no idea what was coming. I was halfway to my car when my phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number again. "We know what you did tonight. Last warning." I looked around the parking garage, suddenly aware of how isolated and vulnerable I was. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more ominous. Someone had been watching me, tracking my movements, and they weren't happy about my amateur espionage. As I reached my car, I heard the screech of tires from the garage entrance. A black SUV came roaring down the ramp, its headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. The SUV skidded to a stop 20 feet away, and 2 men got out. They were big, well-dressed, and moving toward me with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. I finally got my car door open and threw myself behind the wheel. The engine turned over on the second try, and I floored the accelerator, tires squealing as I raced toward the exit. In my rearview mirror, I could see the men running back to their SUV. The chase that followed was like something out of a movie, except movies don't capture the sheer terror of being pursued through empty city streets by people who clearly meant you harm. I ran red lights, took turns at dangerous speeds, and drove through neighborhoods I'd never seen before, all while the black SUV stayed right behind me. Finally, I had an idea. There was a 24-hour donut shop near the police station that was always busy with cops grabbing coffee and late-night snacks. If I could make it there, my pursuers would have to back off. I took a sharp right onto Beacon Street, nearly clipping a parked car, and raced toward the donut shop. The SUV followed, but as soon as they saw the police cars in the parking lot, they peeled off and disappeared into the night. I sat in my car outside the donut shop for 20 minutes, shaking with adrenaline and trying to process what had just happened. This was bigger than an affair, bigger than embezzlement, bigger than anything I'd imagined. Damian Roarke had resources and connections that went far beyond a travel agency CEO, and I'd just made myself a target. But I also had something he didn't know about, evidence that could destroy him. The question was, what was I going to do with it? My phone rang. Rick again. "Eddie, where the hell are you? I've been trying to call for an hour." "I'm fine. Just had a little adventure." "What's up?" "I've got more information about your boy Damian. You're not going to like it." "Try me." "He's connected, Eddie. Like seriously connected. My friend who works at the Ocean View says he's seen Damian there with people who make normal rich guys look like paupers. Politicians, judges, business leaders. And they're not just having social dinners." "What kind of dinners are they having?" "The kind where envelopes full of cash change hands. The kind where people discuss things that would make headlines if they ever became public. Your wife's boss isn't just stealing money, he's laundering it. And if you keep poking around, you're going to end up as fish food in Boston Harbor." I thought about the chase, about the men who'd been waiting for me in the parking garage, about the threatening text messages. Rick was right. I was in over my head. But I was also angry, angrier than I'd ever been in my life. These people had destroyed my marriage, ruined my career, and now they were trying to intimidate me into silence. Well, they'd picked the wrong guy to mess with. "Rick," I said, "I need your help with something. Something that's going to get very messy very quickly." "What do you need?" "I need to disappear for a while, and when I come back, I'm going to burn their whole world down." Chapter 4. Revenge Escalates. The next morning brought a new level of hell. My face was plastered across every social media platform in the city, but not as the wronged husband anymore. Somehow, overnight, I'd become the villain of the story. "Unhinged husband stalks wife and boss," read the headline on Boston Today's website. The article painted me as a controlling, abusive spouse who couldn't handle his wife's professional success. There were quotes from anonymous sources describing my erratic behavior and history of jealousy. The sources weren't that anonymous. I recognized Jess and Tanya's handiwork in the carefully crafted character assassination. They'd spun the restaurant confrontation as evidence of my mental instability rather than proof of Mira's infidelity. The affair was being reframed as a workplace friendship that I'd violently disrupted due to my own insecurities. My phone was ringing constantly with reporters wanting to interview the abusive husband. My email was flooded with hate mail, and someone had posted my home address online with suggestions about what angry citizens should do about men like me. I was officially unemployed as of 9 a.m. My boss called to inform me that my recent behavior was incompatible with the company's values, and my administrative leave was being converted to immediate termination. Apparently, being the victim of adultery was a fireable offense if it generated negative publicity. "You ruined my life, Eddie," Mira said when she finally called. "I hope you're happy." "Happy? Mira, you were stealing money with your boss and having an affair. How exactly did I ruin your life by exposing the truth?" "It wasn't stealing. It was creative accounting. And what Damian and I have is real. We love each other." "You love his expense account. You're pathetic. You always were. I should have left you years ago." "Well, now you're free to be with the man you love, assuming he doesn't end up in federal prison." The line went quiet. When Mira spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more calculating. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Eddie. Damian has friends, important friends. If you keep pushing this, you're going to get hurt." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. Back off, take your settlement money and disappear. Otherwise, things are going to get very bad for you very quickly." She hung up before I could respond. "Settlement money? What settlement money?" I found out an hour later when a process server showed up at my door. Mira was filing for divorce, claiming emotional abuse, mental cruelty, and irreconcilable differences. She was asking for half of everything we owned, plus alimony, plus damages for the emotional trauma I'd caused her by exposing her affair. The legal papers also included a restraining order requiring me to stay at least 500 feet away from her, her workplace, and her friends. Violating the order would result in immediate arrest. I was being systematically destroyed, and the worst part was how efficiently they were doing it. Damian Roarke had connections throughout the city's power structure, and he was using all of them to crush me. Within 24 hours, I'd lost my job, my reputation, and my legal right to confront the people who'd betrayed me. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I would roll over and accept defeat like a good little victim. They didn't realize that being pushed to the edge had freed me from caring about consequences. I called Rick. "Remember when you said things were going to get messy?" "Yeah. They just got messier. I need that favor now." "What do you need?" "A place to lay low for a few days, and access to someone who knows how to make information public without it being traced back to the source." Rick was quiet for a moment. "Eddie, are you sure about this? Once you cross this line, there's no going back." They crossed the line first. I'm just evening the score. Okay, I know a place, and I know someone who can help with the other thing. But Eddie, be careful, these people play for keeps. The place turned out to be a studio apartment above a pawn shop in Southie, owned by Rick's cousin, who asked no questions and accepted cash payments. It wasn't much, a bed, a kitchenette, and a bathroom that had seen better decades. But it was off the grid and gave me a base of operations for what I was planning. The someone Rick knew was a freelance journalist named Sarah Chen who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. She'd been blacklisted by most major publications for being too aggressive in her investigations, but she had a blog with a devoted following and contacts throughout the city's underground information network. Your boy Roarke has been on my radar for months, she told me when we met at a coffee shop in Cambridge. I've been trying to find someone with inside access to elite travel solutions. You might be exactly what I need. I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, the financial records, the text messages, the photos, everything that proved Damian and Mira were stealing money and using it to fund their affair. Sarah's eyes lit up as she reviewed the material. This is incredible. I can trace at least 15 different fraudulent transactions just in these records, but I need more. I need proof of where the money is going and who else is involved. What kind of proof? Bank records, tax documents, evidence of the political connections. Your wife's boss isn't just stealing from his company. He's part of a larger network that's been laundering money through Boston's luxury service industry for years. How do we get that evidence? Sarah smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression. We're going to set a trap, and your wife is going to be the bait. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Sarah would approach Mira, claiming to be a lifestyle blogger who wanted to write about successful women in the travel industry. The interview would be conducted at Damian's house. He was throwing a pool party for Elite Travel's top performers that weekend, and Sarah would use the opportunity to plant surveillance equipment throughout the property. Meanwhile, I would create a distraction that would force Damian and his associates to discuss their illegal activities in detail. The distraction would be public, humiliating, and designed to make them panic about their exposure. What kind of distraction? I asked. Leave that to me, Sarah said. I have some ideas that will get their attention. Saturday evening, I watched from across the street as guests arrived at Damian Roarke's mansion in Brookline. The house was exactly what I'd expected: ostentatious, expensive, and designed to intimidate anyone who wasn't part of Boston's elite social circle. Mira arrived at 7, wearing a white sundress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She looked happy, confident, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse around her. Damian greeted her at the door with a kiss that lasted long enough to make several other guests uncomfortable. Sarah was already inside, posing as a blogger and charming everyone with her fake enthusiasm for luxury travel and successful women. She'd given me a small radio that would let me hear what was happening at the party, and I settled in to wait for my cue. At 8:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Ready? I drove to Damian's house and parked directly in front, making sure my car was visible from the party. Then I got out and began my performance. The first phase was subtle. I opened my car's hood and started examining the engine, occasionally looking toward the house with binoculars I'd brought for the purpose. Several party guests noticed me and pointed me out to their hosts. The second phase was more direct. I took out a camera with a telephoto lens and began taking pictures of the party, making sure the flash was visible. Within minutes, I could see people inside getting agitated. The third phase was inspired, and I knew at the moment the opening steel guitar riff of Before He Cheats exploded across Damian Roarke's perfectly manicured backyard at 112 decibels. I'd hidden 2 weatherproof PA speakers in the boxwood hedge the night before, wired to a pair of car batteries and a Bluetooth trigger I could hit from 300 yards away. When Carrie Underwood started singing about keying a pretty little souped-up 4-wheel drive, half the Botoxed guests actually flinched like they'd been slapped. I was perched on the roof of the neighbor's pool house, technically trespassing, definitely violating the restraining order Damian had slapped on me after I'd accidentally forwarded his mistress's nudes to his wife, binoculars in one hand, phone in the other. The playlist was cued and merciless. Carrie into B.J. Thomas, into Hank Williams, into Jolene, Lion Eyes, and, because I'm not completely without a sense of theater, Shania Twain's That Don't Impress Me Much on loop. The effect was immediate and glorious. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne flutes lowered. A woman in a dress that cost more than my car pressed both hands to her ears like she could physically block out the accusation in the lyrics. A hedge fund guy I recognized from the indictment list actually turned white under his Saint Tropez tan when Your Cheatin' Heart came on, as if Hank himself had risen from the grave to call him out personally. Phones came out. Neighbors 3 streets over started texting the group chat. Someone called the cops within 90 seconds. Damian appeared on the marble terrace in a linen shirt the color of money, face blotched red with fury, screaming into his phone. I watched his lips. Shut it off. Find out where it's coming from, now. But the real payoff was happening 2 miles away, in the surveillance van Sarah had borrowed from a friend at the Globe. She was patched into the parabolic mic I'd planted in the pergola that morning, recording every panicked word Damian spoke while his empire unraveled to a country western soundtrack. "They're panicking," she whispered through my earpiece, voice trembling with glee. "He just told Vincent to move the Peterson account money tonight. Grand Cayman, usual route." Then he called someone Your Honor and said, "We need that search warrant quashed by morning." Eddie, this is pure gold. I grinned so hard my face hurt. Keep rolling. I'm just getting started. The 4th song was Goodbye Earl by the Chicks. That's when the first cruiser rolled up. Lights, but no siren. Someone with pull had told them to keep it quiet. 2 uniforms stepped through the gate, looking uncomfortable among the Rolexes and Ristelaine. I stood up, hands visible, and let them see me. "Evening, officers. I believe I'm the disturbance you're looking for." They cuffed me without enthusiasm. One of them actually muttered, "Nice playlist," as he tightened the zip ties. I didn't resist. I'd done what I came to do. From the back seat of the cruiser, I watched the party implode in real time. Guests stampeded toward the valet like the house was on fire. Mira Roarke, Damian's Ice Queen wife, stood on the front lawn in a $5,000 dress, mascara rivers down her cheeks, screaming at Damian while he tried to herd people back inside. A drone I definitely hadn't launched buzzed overhead, live streaming the chaos to a local news chopper that had magically appeared. I made a mental note to send whoever was flying it a very nice bottle of something. The real masterpiece revealed itself the next morning, after I'd been released on bail and was nursing a vending machine coffee in the courthouse lobby. Sarah called, practically vibrating through the phone. "You're not going to believe what happened after you left. Try me." Someone, completely anonymous, called the Suffolk County Health Department claiming there were controlled substances being openly distributed at the Roarke residence. Inspectors showed up at dawn with a warrant. And Eddie. The pool was bright, radioactive green, like antifreeze on St. Patrick's Day. Everyone who'd gone swimming looked like they'd fallen into a vat of Nickelodeon slime. The lawn sprinklers had been reprogrammed overnight. The entire front yard now reads Cheater in perfect 10-foot letters of dead grass. You can see it from space. I started laughing and couldn't stop. Oh, and the catering staff swears the top-shelf Macallan was replaced with laxative-spiked iced tea. Half the Massachusetts judiciary is currently occupying every toilet in the North Shore. "That's tragic," I managed, wiping my eyes. "Isn't it just?" She paused, and her voice dropped. "But we got everything, Eddie. Crystal clear audio of Damian instructing his CFO to shred documents, bribe a federal judge, and move $43 million through a shell charity in the Caymans. We've got names, account numbers, drop dates. This is the kill shot." I leaned my head against the cool marble wall of the courthouse, feeling something loosen in my chest for the first time in months. What happens now? Now we go public. Front page tomorrow, full investigative package online tonight. But Eddie, her voice changed. There's something else. I heard Damian on the phone after the cops took you. He told someone, the husband problem needs to be handled permanently. No more games. The loosening in my chest snapped tight again. I think he means me. I know he means you. She took a shaky breath. Eddie, be careful. These people don't lose gracefully. As if the universe had been waiting for its cue, my phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number. Your friend the bartender is with us. Pier 17 warehouse. Come alone. Bring every copy of every file, every recording, every photograph. 1 hour. After that, we start removing pieces of him. Attached was a photo. Rick, unconscious, zip-tied to a chair under a single hanging bulb. His face was already swelling. My blood turned to ice. Rick had nothing to do with this, except knowing me. He'd poured me whiskey the night I came home from Syria, missing half my squad and all of my faith in anything. He'd listened when I couldn't talk, talked when I couldn't listen. And now they had him because I'd decided to burn down a dragon in its lair. Sarah was still talking, something about safe houses, calling the FBI, but the words blurred. I have to go, I said. Eddie, no, wait for... I hung up. I walked out of the courthouse into a morning that felt too bright, too normal. Commuters hustling to work, a food truck selling breakfast burritos, gulls screaming overhead like nothing in the world was wrong. I got in my car, started the engine, and stared at the steering wheel for a long moment. Then I opened the glove box and took out the Glock I swore I'd never carry again after Kabul. Checked the magazine, racked the slide. 1 hour. I put the car in drive and headed toward the harbor, the morning sun glinting off the water like broken glass. Damian wanted a war. Fine. He was about to learn what happens when you kidnap the wrong man's family. The address led to Pier 17, the forgotten end of the Boston waterfront where even the gulls sounded tired. The warehouse squatted between two rusting gantry cranes like a concrete toad. Windows punched out years ago, graffiti layered so thick it looked like scar tissue. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, painting everything the color of old nicotine. The tide slapped against barnacled pilings with a wet, rhythmic sound that felt like a countdown. I sat in my 12-year-old Civic with the engine off, windows cracked just enough to keep the glass from fogging. My breath came in small, controlled puffs. The bag on the passenger seat held 3 encrypted thumb drives, a stack of printed ledger pages, and the micro-recorder that had caught Damian admitting, on tape, that he'd paid a state senator in untraceable cryptocurrency. Everything that could put him away for 3 lifetimes. My phone buzzed against my thigh. Unknown number. I let it ring twice, then thumbed, accept. You came. Good. The voice was calm, almost bored. I recognized it anyway. Vincent, Damian's head of security, the one with the broken nose I'd given him at the pool party. Now listen carefully. Walk to the roll-up door on the east side. Come alone. Bring everything. Files, photos, recordings, all of it. Any sign of police, media, or that girlfriend of yours with the camera, and your friend loses a finger every 30 seconds until he runs out. How do I know he's still alive? A rustle. Then Rick's voice. Hoarse, wet, furious. Eddie, don't do it, man. These guys are... A dull thud, like meat hitting tile. Rick made a sound I'd never unhear. The line went dead. I was out of the car before the phone hit the seat. The night air tasted of diesel and dead fish. My shoes crunched on broken glass as I crossed the street. Every instinct I had, 20 years of them, honed on war zones and city council corruption, screamed that walking in there was suicide. But Rick had taken a beating meant for me. He'd carried my cameras in Fallujah when I couldn't walk. I owed him a debt that didn't have an interest rate. The roll-up door was open 6 feet, just enough for a man to slip under. Inside, the darkness had weight. The air was colder, thick with the smell of machine oil, mold, and something coppery underneath. Weak security bulbs glowed high in the rafters, turning the rows of shipping containers into a canyon of rusted steel. My footsteps echoed too loud, like the only sound except my pulse in my ears. "Keep walking," Vincent called from somewhere ahead. "Hands where I can see them." I moved deeper, past containers stenciled with Cyrillic, Arabic, Chinese, ghosts of cargo that had never been claimed. The concrete was stained black in patches that might have been oil, and again. I forced myself to breathe through my mouth. 50 yards in, the canyon opened into a clearing lit by a single hanging work lamp. Rick was there, duct-taped to a metal chair that looked like it had been stolen from an elementary school. His left eye was swollen shut, lip split, shirt torn open to reveal bruises blooming across his ribs like storm clouds. Blood dotted the concrete in front of him in perfect spheres, as if someone had flicked a paintbrush. 3 men in tailored suits stood around him like bouncers at a funeral. One held a suppressed Glock loose at his side. Another toyed with a bench-made knife the way a smoker plays with a lighter. The third just watched me with the flat calm of a man who'd killed before and found it uneventful. Damian Roarke stood behind Rick, one hand resting almost affectionately on Rick's shoulder. The polished CEO from the society pages was gone. His white dress shirt was untucked and speckled with blood, some his, some not. His lip was split, cheekbone already purpling from whatever had happened after I'd dumped him in his own koi pond 2 nights ago, but his eyes were bright, almost feverish. "Eddie Lawton," he said, voice soft, almost wondering. "The man who's caused me so much trouble." "Let him go," I said. "This is between us." Damian smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Actually, it's between you and some very powerful people who don't appreciate having their business arrangements disrupted." He squeezed Rick's shoulder hard enough that Rick hissed. "Did you really think you could steal from me, humiliate me, destroy my reputation, and there would be no consequences?" "I didn't steal anything. I exposed your theft. There's a difference." He laughed, short and sharp. "Theft? Eddie, you have no idea what you've stumbled into. Elite Travel Solutions is just the pretty brochure. We move more than rich tourists. We move favors, secrets, people who need to disappear, money that can't see daylight. We're the travel agents for the apocalypse." He stepped out from behind the chair, circling me slowly. The overhead lamp carved harsh shadows across his face, turning him into something medieval. "You think those ledgers you photographed are the whole story? Those are the receipts we let people see. The real books are written in blood and silence. Senators, generals, 3-letter agencies who pretend to hate us on television and rent our jets on Friday nights. You poked a hornet's nest with a nuclear warhead." I set the bag on the floor, slow, deliberate. "Then why not just kill me and be done?" "Because you're useful." He stopped in front of me, close enough I could smell the copper on his breath. "See, the people I work for like examples. Quiet ones, ones that don't make the papers. You're going to walk out of here, delete everything, and tell the world you made it all up. A nervous breakdown. Too much time in war zones. And every year on your birthday, you'll get a postcard from a tropical location reminding you what happens if you ever change your mind." Rick made a wet sound that might have been a laugh. "He's not going to do it, Damian. Eddie's a terrible liar." Vincent stepped forward and drove a fist into Rick's kidney. Rick jackknifed as much as the tape allowed, gasping. I took a half step, and the guy with the Glock raised it lazily, more warning than threat. "Yet." Damian tilted his head. "Or we can do it the other way. We start with your friend here, fingers first, then knees. When he passes out, we'll wake him up with ammonia and start on you. Eventually, you'll both beg to sign whatever we put in front of you, and when it's done, we'll dump what's left in the channel for the crabs. Your choice." The silence stretched, broken only by Rick's labored breathing and the distant slap of water against pilings. I looked at Rick. He met my eyes with the one that wasn't swollen shut and gave the tiniest shake of his head. "Don't," I looked back at Damian. There's a third option. He raised an eyebrow. I reached slowly into my jacket. Not for a weapon, but for the burner phone in the inside pocket. Held it up so they could all see. See, while you were monologuing, that phone has been live streaming everything you just said to a server in Reykjavik. Audio, video, GPS coordinates. Right now, it's uploading to 20 different cloud accounts, some of which belong to journalists who hate your guts, some to federal agents who've been trying to nail you for years. There's even a copy set to auto-post to X in... I glanced at the screen. 6 minutes, unless I enter a kill code. Damian's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. A flicker, like a shark sensing blood in the water, but realizing it might be its own. "You're bluffing," he said. "Am I?" I turned the phone so he could see the timer counting down. 5:47. 5:46. Vincent shifted his weight. The guy with the knife stopped flipping it. Rick started laughing, a broken, wheezing sound. "Told you he's a terrible liar. That thing's been streaming since he crossed the threshold. I watched him hit record with his thumb." Damian stared at me for a long 5 seconds that felt like hours. Then he smiled again, smaller this time. "Well played, Eddie. But here's the thing about hornet nests." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his own phone. "Sometimes the hornets have bigger friends." He tapped the screen once. Every light in the warehouse went out at once. The work lamp, the security bulbs, even the exit signs, everything plunged into absolute black. Then the emergency strobes kicked in, blood red, pulsing like a dying star, and the alarms began to scream. Damian's voice came out of the darkness, amused now. "Let's see how your little broadcast likes a fireworks show." Gunfire erupted before the echo end. Money laundering. Among other things, for the past 3 years, we've been facilitating financial transactions for clients who require discretion. Politicians who need campaign contributions that can't be traced. Judges who appreciate gifts that don't appear on disclosure forms. Business leaders who need competitors eliminated through regulatory pressure. And Mira helped you do it. Mira is a genius at making dirty money look clean. Every fraudulent transaction you discovered was actually a legitimate payment for services rendered. Services that keep this city's power structure functioning smoothly. I looked at Rick, who was watching me with an expression that mixed fear and determination. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear. Permanently. You've seen too much, learned too much, and caused too much damage to be allowed to continue breathing." "And if I give you the evidence?" "Then your friend dies quickly instead of slowly." That's when I realized I'd walked into exactly the trap I'd expected, but I'd come prepared for it. While they'd been talking, I'd been quietly activating the GPS tracker Sarah had given me and streaming audio to her through an app on my phone. Every word of Damian's confession was being recorded and transmitted to someone who knew how to use it. "There's just one problem with your plan," I said. "What's that?" "You assume I came here to negotiate?" I pulled the fire alarm. The warehouse immediately filled with the deafening sound of emergency sirens. Emergency lighting kicked in, strobing red lights that turned the space into a chaotic nightmare of shadows and confusion. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of approaching sirens, real ones. The noise was physical, a wall of pressure that slammed into my chest and made my ears ring. I tasted copper. I'd bitten the inside of my cheek when the first alarm hit. Every strobe painted the world in arterial red, then plunged it back into darkness, like a heart trying to beat inside a dying body. Crates became monoliths, cathedrals of cardboard and steel, throwing impossible shadows that clawed across the concrete. In the chaos, I dove behind a shipping container as Damian's men drew guns and started shooting. The first burst was disciplined, 3-round taps, then it dissolved into panic fire. Bullets ricocheted off metal surfaces, sparks flying in the strobing light. Brief white-blue constellations that died before they could become stars. Someone screamed, high and animal. I didn't look to see who. I crawled along the floor, using the containers as cover, trying to reach Rick. My knees scraped concrete, palms too. The air stank of cordite, hot steel, and something sweeter, blood already. Somewhere a pallet of imported perfume had taken a round. The smell of jasmine and gunpowder braided together until I wanted to gag. "Find him!" Damian was shouting over the alarms, voice cracking for the first time all night. "Find him and kill him!" I reached Rick's chair and started cutting his bonds with a pocket knife. The rope was cheap sisal, but my hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to saw through the first knot. Rick's wrists were raw, skin flayed to pink meat. "Can you run?" "Better than I can fly," he gasped. But his voice was paper-thin, the joke a reflex. He tried to stand and his legs folded like cheap lawn chairs. I caught him under the arms, felt the damp warmth of blood soaking through his shirt from where they'd worked him over earlier. We staggered together, half carrying, half dragging, toward what I hoped was the side exit. We made it about 20 feet before one of the gunmen spotted us. A muzzle flashed, once, twice, and the round spanged off the container inches from my head, showering us with orange sparks that hissed against my neck like angry wasps. More bullets filled the air, and I realized we were pinned down with nowhere to go. The warehouse doors were too far away, and Damian's men were positioned between us and any exit. Rick sagged against me. "Leave me, just go." "Shut up," I hissed, and meant it. That's when the real cavalry arrived. The warehouse doors, massive rolling steel, exploded inward with a concussion that knocked dust from the rafters. Spotlights speared through the haze, white and merciless, pinning everyone in place like insects on a card. Then the voices, amplified, overlapping, impossible to ignore. "Federal agents! Drop your weapons! Hands in the air!" Not just police, FBI. Full HRT kit, helmets, plate carriers, HK-416s. They flowed in like black water, 2 stacks breaching left, 2 right, one holding center with a ballistic shield the size of a billboard. Someone had taken my transmitted evidence very seriously. The gunfight that followed was brief but intense. Damian's men, mostly ex-cops and ex-military who thought they were hard, discovered what outgunned really means. One tried to swing his AR toward the entry team and took 3 rounds center mass before his finger found the trigger. Another threw his pistol down so fast it clattered like a dropped wrench. Within 45 seconds it was over except for the crying. Damian himself tried to run. I saw him bolt from behind the office mezzanine, suit jacket flapping, loafers slapping wet concrete. He made it maybe 30 feet before 2 agents hit him low and high simultaneously, like linebackers sacking a quarterback. The sound his body made hitting the floor was deeply satisfying. As the dust settled, I found myself face to face with a woman in an FBI windbreaker who looked like she'd been having a very long day. Her ponytail had come half undone, and there was a streak of someone else's blood across her cheek like war paint. "Mr. Lawton?" "Agent Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division." She had to shout over the dying alarms. "We've been investigating Elite Travel Solutions for 8 months. Your evidence just gave us everything we needed to make arrests." "How did you get here so fast?" "Your journalist friend has been feeding us information for weeks." She nodded toward the mezzanine, where I now saw Sarah, my Sarah, being helped down the stairs by another agent, camera still around her neck like a press badge from hell. "When we got your transmission tonight, we were already in position 2 blocks away." I looked around the warehouse as agents processed the crime scene. Zip ties snapped. Miranda rights were recited in flat, exhausted voices. Someone had found the server rack I'd photographed earlier. They were already pulling drives. Yellow evidence markers sprouted across the floor like plastic flowers. "What about Mira?" Martinez's mouth twisted. "She's being arrested as we speak, along with 12 other associates of Mr. Roarke's organization. We hit 4 locations simultaneously: her penthouse, the corporate jet at Hanscom, 2 safe houses in Revere." "What happens now?" Agent Martinez smiled grimly. "Now they all go to prison for a very long time, and you get to testify in what's going to be the biggest financial corruption trial in Massachusetts history." RICO, wire fraud, money laundering, bribery of public officials. We've got terabytes. As we walked out of the warehouse, cold night air hit my face like absolution. The perimeter was a carnival of flashing lights. State police, Boston PD, FBI Suburbans, even a couple of unmarked Crown Vics that screamed U.S. Attorney. Reporters were already massing beyond the tape, cameras raised like periscopes. I saw Damian being loaded into an FBI van. His $3,000 suit was torn at the knee, tie askew, hair matted with sweat and someone else's blood. 2 agents gripped his elbows like he was made of glass. He looked up and saw me watching, and for a moment, our eyes met. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by a man who'd just realized his empire was crumbling. "This isn't over," he called out, voice hoarse. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," I called back, surprised at how steady I sounded, "I think I do. You're a small-time crook who got too greedy and too careless. Enjoy federal prison, Damian. I hear the food's terrible." The van doors slammed shut, and Damian Roarke disappeared from my life forever. Almost. Because there was still one more person I needed to confront. I found her near the ambulances, wrapped in a shock blanket even though she wasn't shaking. Mira Roarke, Damian's younger sister, the supposed brains behind the legitimate side of Elite Travel Solutions. The woman who'd smiled at charity galas while laundering cartel money through fake vacation packages. She was sitting on the back of an EMT truck, wrists cuffed in front, looking smaller than I remembered. When she saw me approaching, something flickered across her face. Resignation, maybe hatred. Hard to tell. "You won," she said quietly. No drama, just fact. "No," I said. "The people you stole from won. The families who lost homes when your shell companies foreclosed. The pensioners whose retirement funds you siphoned into Damian's private jet. They won." She looked away, toward where her brother had vanished. "He'll kill you for this, even from prison. You know that, right?" I crouched, so we were eye level. "Maybe, but here's the thing, Mira. I'm done hiding. And thanks to you, I've got nothing left to lose." One of the agents tapped my shoulder. Time to go give a statement. As I stood, Mira spoke again, almost too soft to hear. "I really think it ends here, with handcuffs and headlines?" I thought about the years I'd spent chasing this story, the threats, the night I'd found my apartment ransacked, my dog poisoned, the way Sarah had looked at me when I told her I was going into that warehouse alone. "No," I said finally. "It ends when people like you stop thinking the world belongs to them." I walked away without looking back. Later, hours later, after statements and coffee that tasted like battery acid and fluorescent interrogation rooms, Sarah found me on the courthouse steps as dawn finally broke over Boston. The sky was the color of a healing bruise. She didn't say anything, just handed me a paper cup that smelled like real coffee and leaned her head on my shoulder. We watched the city wake up. Delivery trucks, early joggers, the first orange line rumbling overhead. "You okay?" she asked eventually. I thought about Rick in the hospital, about Damian in a holding cell, about Mira's last words, about the trial that would stretch years and all the others we still hadn't caught. "No," I said, "but I will be." She slipped her hand into mine. "Good, because we're not done. There's a senator in Virginia who took Roarke money, and a bank in the Caymans that's about to have a very bad week." I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. It hurt my ribs, but it was worth it. "Then let's get started." Behind us, the federal building loomed, all granite and American flags. Ahead, the city spread out like a circuit board, lights flickering off as morning took over. Damian had been wrong. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The FBI had set up a command center in the parking lot outside Elite Travel Solutions office building. News vans lined the street, reporters were broadcasting live updates, and federal agents were carrying boxes of evidence out of the building in a steady stream. Mira was sitting in the back of an unmarked car, her hands cuffed behind her back, when I approached. She looked up as I got closer, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Eddie," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you." "I'm listening." "This is all a misunderstanding. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Damian told me the money transfers were legal, that we were just helping clients with complex financial arrangements." "You knew exactly what you were doing, Mira. I read your text messages. You bragged about how easy it was to hide stolen money. I was trying to impress him. I thought if I helped him succeed, we could build a life together." "You built a life together. It just happened to be built on fraud and theft." Agent Martinez approached us. "Mr. Lawton, we're ready for your statement. Mrs. Lawton, your attorney is here." I watched as Mira was led away, still protesting her innocence to anyone who would listen. 5 years of marriage, and I was finally seeing who she really was, not the woman I'd fallen in love with, but someone who'd been willing to destroy other people's lives for money and status. The next few hours were a blur of statements, interviews, and evidence review. The scope of Damian's operation was staggering. Over $3 million in fraudulent transactions, bribes to city officials, tax evasion, and money laundering for organized crime figures. Mira's role had been crucial to making it all work, and her detailed records had provided the FBI with everything they needed to unravel the entire network. As the sun came up over Boston Harbor, I found myself standing on the roof of the FBI building, looking out at the city where my life had fallen apart and been rebuilt in the span of a week. Rick joined me, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a bandage on his forehead where Damian's men had roughed him up. "Hell of a week," he said. "That's one way to put it. You know what the best part is?" "What?" "You didn't just get revenge on the people who betrayed you. You took down an entire criminal organization. You're a genuine hero." I thought about that as I watched the news vans packing up their equipment and the federal agents finishing their work. A week ago, I'd been a cuckolded husband whose biggest concern was whether my wife was cheating on me. Now I was the key witness in a federal corruption case that would probably send a dozen people to prison. "I don't feel like a hero," I said. "I feel like someone who got pushed too far and pushed back." "Sometimes that's the same thing." My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I tensed, expecting another threat from Damian's associates. But it was from Sarah Chen. "Check the news. You're going to love this." I pulled up the Boston Globe's website on my phone and saw the headline: "Elite Travel Scandal. FBI arrests 14 in massive fraud scheme." Below that was a smaller headline: "Wronged husband's investigation exposes corruption network." The article detailed everything: the affair, the embezzlement, the money laundering, the political corruption. But it also told the story of how an ordinary citizen had uncovered the scheme and helped bring the criminals to justice. I was being portrayed as a hero who'd risked his life to expose corruption. Even better was the follow-up article: "Viral video couple, where are they now?" The piece revealed that Mira and Damian were facing federal charges that could result in 20-year prison sentences. Damian's wife had filed for divorce and was claiming half of his assets, which were being seized by the government anyway. Elite Travel Solutions had been shut down, its employees were unemployed, and its clients were being investigated for their own potential crimes. Mira's friends, Jess and Tanya, who had helped spread lies about me on social media, were also facing charges for their roles in the money laundering scheme. The article included photos of them being arrested at their expensive gym, still wearing their designer workout clothes. But the most satisfying part was the quote from Mira's father: "We are deeply ashamed of our daughter's actions and fully support her prosecution. We owe Eddie Lawton an apology for doubting his character." "You know what this means?" Rick asked. "What?" "You're going to be rich. Book deals, movie rights, speaking engagements. Everyone's going to want to hear the story of how you brought down the elite travel conspiracy. I thought about that possibility as I watched the city wake up below us. A week ago, I'd been worried about losing my house in a divorce settlement. Now, I was looking at potential financial security beyond anything I'd ever imagined. But more importantly, I'd learned something about myself that I'd never known before. When pushed to the edge, when everything I cared about was threatened, I was capable of fighting back in ways that surprised even me. I wasn't just a practical IT guy who fixed other people's computer problems. I was someone who could take on powerful enemies and win. "There's just one thing I need to do," I told Rick. "What's that?" "I need to go back to that restaurant." The Ocean View restaurant was nearly empty when I arrived that evening. The manager recognized me immediately. My face had been all over the news for days, and approached with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Mr. Lawton, is everything all right?" "I'd like a table," I said. "The same table where my wife was sitting last week." He led me to the table by the windows, the one with the perfect view of Boston Harbor. I ordered the same meal Mira and Damian had shared: the expensive champagne, the overpriced entrees, the dessert that cost more than most people's daily wages. As I ate, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A week ago, I'd been the ignored husband watching his wife cheat on him from across this same restaurant. Tonight, I was the man who'd brought down her entire criminal organization. The irony was perfect. When the waiter brought the check, I signed it with a flourish and left a tip that was probably bigger than my old daily salary. Then I walked out of the restaurant and into the Boston night, a free man in every sense of the word. Behind me, the city sparkled with lights and possibilities. Ahead of me lay a future that I would write for myself, without anyone else's betrayal or manipulation to hold me back. Mira had asked me where I was going in such a stunning dress, metaphorically speaking. Now I had an answer. I was going wherever I wanted to go, and I was going there on my own terms. The woman who'd tried to destroy me was facing federal prison. The man who'd corrupted her was facing the same fate. Their friends, their associates, their entire network of criminals and enablers, all of them were facing justice. And me? I was facing the rest of my life as a man who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. As I walked through the streets of Boston, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow, the newspapers would run follow-up stories about the elite travel scandal. Next week, there would be preliminary hearings where I'd testify about everything I'd discovered. Next month, there would be trials that would send corrupt officials and white-collar criminals to prison for decades. But tonight, there was just me, walking through the city I'd helped clean up, knowing that I'd faced the worst betrayal of my life and turned it into the greatest victory. They'd asked where I was going in such a stunning dress. The answer was simple: I was going to win.